So, you're thinking of buying or selling a house in the South Carolina Lowcountry, and you want to know, what's this house actually worth? I know everybody looks at websites like Zillow and they look at the Zestimates and they look at realtor.com, and there's a lot of ways of figuring out what's something worth. Well, in today's video, we're going to break down and we're going to look at a couple of different scenarios. One, if you were buying a property, and one, if you were selling a property, to determine exactly what is that house potentially worth. And we're getting after it right now. Do you want to know everything there is to know about the South Carolina Lowcountry, whether it's Bluffton, Beaufort, Hilton Head Island, or Jasper County? Then subscribe below and tap that bell for notifications so you'll be the first to know everything about the current market here. My name is David Simcox, host of the channel and a local realtor. I get calls and emails every day from people just like you and you and you looking to make their move here, and I absolutely love it. So whether you're making your move in 3 days, 3 months, or 3 years, give me a call, send me an email, shoot me a text, or book a Zoom call, all in the description below, so I can help you find your Lowcountry lifestyle. Now, in today's video, we are going to be going inside my computer and we're going to be doing what's referred to as a CMA, or a comparative market analysis. And this is a way of sort of determining what a house is potentially worth. So, what is something actually worth? Well, in real life, something is worth what a willing buyer and a willing seller are willing to agree to. But it's not always that easy. Now, banks use a method called an appraisal to determine what a house is worth and how much money they're willing to lend on it. And the way they determine an appraisal is by looking at other properties that have sold that have similar characteristics, make adjustments to those comparable properties to make them look as similar to the subject property as possible. And that's how they come up with a determination of value. So when I do a CMA, or a comparative market analysis for one of my customers, it's very similar to an appraisal, but I'm not a licensed appraiser and it's not as in detailed as an appraisal would go, but it does give you a pretty good idea of what something could potentially be worth. And I'm going to go through 2 scenarios today. So I'm going to show you one for a buyer and I'm going to show you one for a seller. And I'm going to show you one that's very easy, and then I'm going to show you one that's much more difficult. And what I think you'll come to understand is that coming up with an estimate of value is not always a science. It's a little bit of an art, and in some cases it's a little bit of a guessing game. So with that being said, we're jumping inside my computer right now. Okay, so this first scenario, we're going to be looking at a buyer scenario. So believe it or not, we've got folks that are interested in a property, and this is a real life scenario, but in maybe 3 months, 6 months, a year from now that you're watching this house could already be gone. So in this scenario, we have this property over in Hampton Hall, and Hampton Hall is a private gated golf course community. And if you've been watching my channel for long, this is a neighborhood that we cover on a regular basis. So this house is basically priced at $1,299,000. This house is 3,620 square feet. It is on 0.35 of an acre, and it is a custom home built in 2020. And it also, this is important, if I look at the map, this is on a golf course, so the view and the lot does matter. All right, this one, we also know here it has a 3-car garage. And so those are kind of the basics. So I'm just going to flip through the photos just so you guys get a feel for this house. This is a full 3-car garage, stucco, custom home. You've got some coffered ceilings. It's a really nice high-end house with a high-end kitchen, high-end appliances. Everything in this house looks really, really nice, okay? So this becomes, because we're trying to determine the value for this property, this becomes what we call the subject property. Now, in order to determine if this price that they're asking, $1,299,000, is a good price, we're going to have to go back in time and we're going to have to look at some sold properties that are similar to see if the price is right. You'll see I've got 3 comparable properties. So 29 Linfield Place, 31 Normandy, and 263 Farnsley Drive. And so we'll start with this one, all right? And I use this spreadsheet here. And so this first column right here, this is my subject property. So here I'm going to list everything that my subject property, or the one that I'm pricing out, has. So we know it has a golf course view. We know it's 4 years old and it's a custom home. The appliances are new and they're high end. 4 bedroom, 3.5 bath. Built, the roof is 2020. The HVAC system is 2020. The lot size is 0.35. It's a full 3-car garage. And the age, again, 2020. The main living area square footage, 3,620. And then I left these other columns blank because they're not super important to this transaction. So I'm going to start with my first property, this 29 Linfield Place. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and I'm going to look at what it sold for. So this one sold for 1.2 million. So I jump over here and I put in 1.2 million. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start making adjustments to this comparable property. I don't make adjustments to the subject property, but I'm going to make adjustments to the comparable property, saying if my comparable property had all the same features as my subject property, what would it have sold for? So it sold for 1.2 million. Now on this one, if we jump back over here, you'll notice on this property right here, which is our comparable property, it was on a wooded lot. Okay, and our subject property was on a golf course lot. So what that tells me is that the wooded lot typically is not worth as much as a golf course lot. So I have to ask myself, if it had a golf course lot instead of a wooded lot, how much more would that property have sold for? So I chose the number 20,000. It's not exactly a perfect number. It could be 30, it could be 40, it could be 15. As long as I use the same number for all my comparables, it's going to be close. Okay. So when I add that 20,000, it's going to bump that total down here up just a little bit. Then if I come down here, the condition, it's also a new home. It's also high end, so I don't have to make any adjustments there. It's also 4 bedrooms, but it does have an extra bathroom. So my subject property was 3 bedroom, 3.5 bathrooms, but my comparable property is 4.5. So I'm saying that extra bathroom is probably worth about $10,000. Now, the reason there's a minus there is I'm saying if this house didn't have that extra bathroom, how much less would it have sold for? I chose the number 10,000. It could be 15. It could be slightly different. As long as I keep it fairly consistent across the board, I'm going to come up with a pretty good number here. So if it didn't have that, minus 10,000. So it's gonna basically update this number down here. The roof and the HVAC are brand new on this one, so no adjustments there. If it had an old 20-year-old roof and 20-year-old HVAC system, I would have added money here. I would have said, hey, if it had a new roof and a new HVAC, I'm going to give some credit for that, maybe 15, 20,000 each. But because it's the same as the subject property, I'm not making any adjustments. Here, the lot size is almost the same. It's 0.31. This one does not have a full 3-car garage. It actually had a 2-car garage plus a golf cart bay. So I'm saying if it had that extra full garage, that 3-car, it would be worth a little bit more. So I'm adding $5,000 to that. The age of the house is similar enough to the subject property that I'm not really worried about making an adjustment here. The square footage, this is where I do make adjustments. So the subject property is 3,620 square feet. This one is slightly less. So I'm going to subtract this number from this number, and that is going to basically be, let's say, 20, and this one is 3,562. I'm just going to do this on this one property so you can kind of get a feel for equals this minus this. All right, so it's 58 square feet difference, and when I multiply that times $280 per square foot, which is just a random number that an appraiser friend gave to me, so equals this times 280 is 16,240, and then my appraiser friend said take 40% of that. So so that gives me an adjusted price, saying if this subject property right here had all the same or similar characteristics as our subject property, it would be worth $1,200,568, which is this number right here. All right, so then I go on to the next subject property, right? 31 Normandy Avenue. All right, so here we've got 31 Normandy Avenue, and here you can see some of the pictures. Just to give you an idea, this is also a brand new exclusive high-end custom home. So really, really nice home that sold, 3,416 square feet on 0.35 acres. This is a 4-bedroom, 4.5 bath, built in 2018. And this one sold for $1,289,000. Okay, so if I jump over here, we're going to make some of those adjustments. Oh yeah, one more thing on that one. This one also is on a golf course lot. So if I zoom in here, you can see this one's on a golf course lot. So we're going to start with our sales price. So we know it sold for $1,289,000. Now, this is a golf course lot. The subject property is also a golf course lot, so I don't need to make any adjustments to the value based on that. We know that this one is a 2018 custom home, very similar to our subject property, so I'm not making any adjustments there. Appliances. These are new high-end appliances, so I'm not making any adjustments there. It's a 4-bedroom. The subject property is a 4-bedroom, no adjustments, but is a 4.5 bath. Our subject property is 3.5 baths, so we have to make an adjustment and say if this didn't have that extra bath, it would be worth $10,000 less. Again, roof and HVAC are newer, so I'm not going to make any adjustments. 0.35 size acre. So again, very similar to the subject property, don't need to make any adjustments. And this one also is a 2-car garage with the golf cart bay. So if it had a full 3-car garage, it would be worth a little bit more. So we're going to add $5,000 there. And then the age, again, 2018, very similar, so no adjustments needed. The square footage is 3,416, so it is smaller than our subject property. And so we're going to take that same formula, we're going to subtract the square footage from the subject property square footage. We're going to multiply it times $280, and then we're going to take that number and multiply times 0.4, and that gives us $22,848. So again, if this house was a little bit bigger, it would be worth a little bit more. And so we're going to add those adjustments to the sales price, and we're going to say it has an adjusted sales price of $1,306,848. All right, so we've gotten 2 comparables so far. Now we're going to jump over to the third comparable and hopefully see if this house that we're looking at is priced right. So this is 263 Farnsley Avenue. So 263 Farnsley Avenue sold. Take a quick peek. Beautiful custom home. As you can see, it's got the 2-car garage plus the golf cart bay. Gorgeous, high-end luxury home. And let's see, this one is also on a golf course, so very similar to our subject property, little bit bigger lot. So 0.46, probably not enough to make a difference. Maybe we'll adjust for that, maybe we won't. 3,077 square feet. And this one sold for $1,199,900. Okay, so we're gonna go in here and we're going to start with the sales price. So $1,999,900. It is a Gulf view. Our subject property is also a Gulf view. Built in 2018, so very similar, no adjustments. The appliances, high-end appliances, no adjustments needed. 4-bedroom, our subject property is a 4-bedroom, so no adjustments needed there. 3.5 bath, same as our subject property, so no adjustments needed. The roof and the AC are 2018. Slightly larger lot, but it's not enough that I really think I need to make an adjustment price-wise. Again, it's got that 2-car garage with the golf cart bay. The subject property had a full 3-car garage. So again, I'm only gonna add $5,000 for that, saying if it had that full 3-car garage, it would be worth a little bit more. The big difference here is going to be the square footage. So this one has 3,077 square feet. Our subject property that our customer's thinking about buying is 3,620 square feet. So when you take the difference in those two numbers, multiplied times $280 per square foot, times 0.4. Again, don't ask me where I came up with that formula. It was given to me by an appraiser to make these adjustments, to run my CMAs. And so that gives me an adjusted price, saying if this house were a little bit larger, it would be worth, say, $60,816 more. I add all those adjustments to the sales price, and we come up with an adjusted value of $1,265,716. So if this house looked a little bit more similar to our subject property, it would have sold for $1,265,716. So what do we do with all these numbers? We add the 3 comparable adjusted values, gives us $3,773,132. We divide it by 3, and that tells me that this property right here, 33 Normandy Avenue, which is one that one of my customers is actually interested in, maybe, possibly, again, this is just an opinion of value, could be worth $1,257,710. So is this house priced right? Yeah, I honestly think this house is probably priced just about perfectly. So what am I going to advise my client to do? Well, I can't tell you that because that's confidential, but I don't think that this house is out of the ballpark. I think they're very much priced about where they should be. But that is kind of the process that I go through when I'm, advising my customers what kind of offer they should make, and, is it priced right? Now, we're going to go a completely opposite direction, and we're going to do a much more difficult process. And this is actually a very similar scenario to one that I did about a year ago when I had somebody that was thinking about listing a house on the river. And, this house is really like a unicorn property. There's really not other properties that are like it. And so when you've got somewhat of a unicorn property, you're going to have to get a little more creative, and you're going to have to make a lot more adjustments to those comparable numbers. So you're going to see a big difference here between what we just did for a neighborhood that has a lot of comparables that are very, very similar to the subject property. And in this scenario, this is going to be more of a very unique property that is going to be more difficult to make those adjustments. So this is a house on the river in the country, out in kind of the boonies, and it was, older. So, the location is really nice, but there was a lot of like mobile homes and, a lot of things around it that probably pulled the value down. It wasn't necessarily in a neighborhood with a bunch of amenities. It was on the river, beautiful property, but again, kind of out in the middle of nowhere with a lot of kind of things around it that pulled the value down. The exterior was kind of rough. It had been around for a while, had some wood rot around the windows, wood rot around the porches. The inside of the house was pretty nice. The kitchen, they had updated the kitchen, so the kitchen was really nice, but the rest of the house was a little dated. Had some stainless appliances. The primary bedroom was again nice, but a little bit dated. Had a big dock and a floating dock, but it was pretty rough. It needed a lot of work, and the roof was probably about 15 years old. HVAC was probably about 5 years old, and it was about an acre on the river. Again, the house was probably in the 1980s. I put 1986. I don't really know. I just guessed. And the square footage was about 1,600. So I don't know if that was exact, but again, for the purpose of this explanation, it doesn't really matter. And there was a boat ramp on the street. Those are some of the basic facts of this scenario. So what I did here is I went in and I want properties that look as similar as possible. Now, normally I only want to go back like 3 months or 6 months, but to find anything even remotely similar in a rural setting, I have to go back a lot further. Okay, now a bank probably wouldn't do this. They're probably still going to keep it at like 30, 60, 90 days, but I wanted properties that really had similar characteristics. So I went back a full 900 days here, and this is Jasper County. So I came up with these 3 comparable properties, and I'll show you what it looks like when I have to make some bigger adjustments and I have to get a little bit more creative with value. So this first one right here, I'll just show you a couple of pictures of this property. Beautiful dock. It looks like it has almost a newer dock here, a newer floating dock. Huge property. And I'll just zip through these photos. And again, these have already sold. So it's got some really cool outbuildings, which I think are really unique. And it's kind of a log cabin feel on the well, this is the outbuilding, but inside the house itself, it still has kind of that log cabin feel. It is a little bit dated, but nice. 1,800 square feet. And this one is actually on 7 acres. And built in 1978, 4-bedroom, 3-bath home. And this one sold for $1,530,000. So I'm going to jump over here and I'm going to start making adjustments. And as you can see right off the bat, there's a lot more adjustments that I had to make to this property than when we were looking at that property that my buyer was looking at. So in this one, we know it sold for $1,530,000. Now we're going to make adjustments saying if this property looked more like my subject property, what would it actually have sold for? So the location, I think it's similar to my subject property because it's also out in the country, not in a POA, no rules. Again, there could be broke down cars, there could be junk on the surrounding properties. There's really no quality control to the neighborhood itself. So I don't really need to make any adjustments there. When I talk about the condition of the property, I think it's similar. It's kind of a log cabin, a little bit dated, very similar to the subject property. The other one, the subject property did have a new kitchen. So this one I think has inferior counters and cabinets. So I'm going to say if it had the newer kitchen, it would be worth $15,000 more. Then I go down here and the appliances, again, are dated. So if it had new appliances, it would be worth maybe $5,000 more. The primary bath, I think, is similar to the subject property, so I'm not making any adjustments there. The dock, in this scenario, the dock is much, much nicer than the subject property. The subject property had an old beat up rundown dock that probably needed a lot of work. So I'm saying if this one also had a beat up dock like the subject property, it would be worth less. So I said $30,000. Again, it's just a guess. It's just an estimate. It could be 50, it could be 40, it could be 70, but I'm making an adjustment there. Again, this one has 1 more bedroom. If it didn't have that, it would be worth less. So I'm taking $10,000 off for that. This one also has a half a bath more. And if it didn't have that, I'm saying it would be worth $2,500 less. I don't know the roof and the HVAC on this comparable property, but this is a big one. And I don't know, this is kind of a guess that I did. This property had 7 acres. The subject property only had 1 acre. I'm estimating, and again, I haven't done an exact lookup on this. This is really just for the illustration of this video, but I estimated that the waterfront land in Jasper County, buying in bulk, 5 acres plus, is probably worth about $100,000 an acre. So I said, since this one had 7 acres and the subject property had 1, if it only had 1, it would be worth $600,000 less. Again, this one has a 1-car detached garage. The subject property had none. So I said, if it didn't have that, again, minus $2,500. The age of the house, similar enough that I didn't make an adjustment. And the square footage is slightly larger than the subject property. So I am saying if it were smaller, it would be worth less. So minus $24,000. I'm using that same formula times, well, actually this one I did times $250 a square foot, and then times 0.4, a little bit less than in the last scenario because we're not dealing with custom homes here. And this one did have some outbuildings. And the other one, this is for extra things that kind of make the property worth more. The other one did have a boat ramp on the street. This one has outbuildings on the property. So I figured those kind of balanced each other out just a little bit. So I didn't make any adjustments. And sales concessions, I didn't take any of those into account. Now, here's where I really made a big adjustment. Because I had to go so far back in time to find this property, this one sold back in October of 2021. And right now we're in March of 2024. So the market has appreciated since then. So I'm taking that into account, and I'm saying if this had sold in the present day, it probably would have sold for at least $100,000 more. So I add that number in, and that gives me an adjusted price of $981,000. So if this property had sold in this current market and had a lot more of the similar characteristics as our subject property, it would have sold for $981,000. So let's go on to the next property. All right, so this next property, 644 West Branch Road. Let's look at some of the numbers here. This one is on Knowles Island, which is actually in a POA type neighborhood in Jasper County. We've got the square footage of 3,068. It's on 1.14 acres and 4-bedroom, 3.5 bath, built in 1999. And this one sold for $875,000. So let's go in and plug some of those numbers in and see what that looks like when we make it become a comparable property. So here we've got the sales price of $875,000. Now this one is superior. We're looking at the overall quality here, right? Or I'm sorry, we're looking at the location first. And because this one is in a controlled POA where all the houses are going to have their lawns kept up and the same building standards, and they all have to look a similar quality, to me, that's a superior location. And so if it didn't have that superior location, it would sell for less. So I'm subtracting $20,000 for that feature. The condition, overall, it's slightly superior to the subject property, but not by much. We'll pop through some pictures real quick so you can see what we're looking at here. This is the comparable property. And I actually went through this house quite a few times. I had a couple buyers that looked at it, but they didn't pull the trigger. Let's go back to our CMA. And so I said, if this one were the same condition as my subject property, that would bring the price down by $10,000. I would say the kitchen is similar to the subject property. The appliances are probably a little bit inferior. So if it had nicer appliances, $5,000 more. And the dock is a little bit nicer, and it has a pier head. And so because it's nicer, I'm saying if it weren't nicer, how much less would it be worth? It would be worth, I'm saying $10,000 less. So I'm subtracting 10,000. Again, this has a 4th bedroom. If it didn't, it would be worth, I'm saying $10,000 less. It's got an extra bathroom here. I'm saying that's worth $2,500. And then the roof is a 2020 roof. The subject property was an older roof. And so I'm saying if it didn't have that newer roof, it would be worth $10,000 less. The acreage is about the same, so no adjustments there. The age of the house is 1999. It's not significant enough that I'm going to make any adjustments. And then the square footage is 3,064 square feet. The subject property was about 1,600 square feet. So I'm going to run that same math. I'm going to subtract 1,600 from 3,064. I'm going to multiply times $250 per square foot. I'm going to take 40% of that number, and that gives me $146,000. So if this house were smaller, it would be worth $146,000 less. And I'll subtract that number. And then the extras, I said this one didn't have extras. Remember our other ones, the subject property had a boat ramp on the street. The second comparable had some really nice outbuildings, but this doesn't have any extras. So I'm saying if it did have extras, it would be worth maybe $25,000 more. So I add that number. And then I'm also making an adjustment here for when this house sold. So it sold about a year ago. And I'm just saying the market has appreciated by about $26,000 on this house over the past year. In my opinion, I'm not an appraiser, but I am a real estate broker, and this is my opinion. And so when I add and subtract all these numbers to that comparable property sale price, I say, if it looked more similar to the subject property, it would have sold for about $722,500. Now we're going to move on to the third and final comparable property. So this one is 864 Broadview Drive, and this is 3,692 square feet on 0.7 acres. This is also in Knowles Island Plantation. So again, it's in a POA where all the houses are of similar quality, and there is quality control in the neighborhood. It is a 4-bedroom, 5.5 bath, built in 2001. And this one sold for $1.2 million. And let's just peek at the pictures real quick so we know what we're looking at. So the first thing that sticks out here is this incredible dock, and it's got a huge pier head, and it's got 2 floating docks, and it's got 2 boat lifts. And let me tell you, that's worth a lot of money. So the house on the outside looks really nice, great curb appeal, and inside, decent kitchen, but not cabinets all the way to the ceiling. So not super high-end luxury kitchen, but pretty darn nice. And so I'm just, give you a feel for this one, and then we're going to jump back in and we're going to make some adjustments to this property. So we know it sold for $1.2 million. We are saying that the location is superior to the subject property. So if it had the inferior location, it would be worth $20,000 less. We know that the overall condition is slightly superior to the subject property. If it weren't, it would be worth less. So we subtract another $20,000 for that. We know that the kitchen is a little bit inferior to our subject property because our subject property did have a newer kitchen. So if it had the newer kitchen, it would be worth more. So I'm adding $10,000 to that. The primary bedroom and primary bath are about the same as the subject property, so I didn't make any adjustments for that. But the big one is this dock. So we know the dock was greatly superior to the subject property, and it had the 2 boat lifts. And so I said, if it didn't have that, it's going to be worth less money. So I subtracted $50,000 for that. I should have subtracted $100,000 for that. But again, I'm just using a little bit of my instinct and knowledge of the local cost to build a dock, and I came up with $50,000. But again, if you were buying this house or selling this house, ultimately you can make your own decisions. Again, we've got one extra bedroom here. If it didn't have that, it would be worth $10,000 less. This is a 5.5 bath. So again, if it didn't have that, it would be worth $12,500 less. It is a little bit smaller lot. It's only 0.7 acres. If it had the little bit larger lot, it would be worth a little more. So I would add $30,000 to that. It has a 3-car attached garage. I think that's a big bonus. If it didn't have that, I would subtract $30,000 from that. The year that it was built, not a big deal. I'm not making any adjustments. And it is quite a bit larger. Our subject property only had 1,600 square feet. This one has 3,692 square feet. So when I subtract that from 1,600, multiply times $250 per square foot, take 40% of that number, and I say if it were smaller, it would be worth $209,200 less. It doesn't have any of those extras. It doesn't have the outbuildings. It doesn't have the boat ramp on the street. So I'd say that if it did have those, it would be worth $25,000 more. And then this one sold back in July of 2023. So if it had sold in the present day, it would sell for more. So I'll make an adjustment for the closing date of $15,000. That gives me an adjusted sales price of $928,300. And when I add all three of those up, $2,631,800 divided by 3 gives me an adjusted estimated price of $877,266. So with that being said, I just want to say that whether you are a buyer that's looking to purchase a house with me as a buyer's agent, or you're a seller and you're looking to list your house with me as a seller's agent, again, value is what a willing buyer and a willing seller are willing to agree to. But again, I just wanted to kind of give you guys an illustration of how we come up with value, whether you're a buyer or a seller. And it's not as easy as just going to Zillow and looking at this estimate and saying, oh, this house says it's worth this. You know, it's not just an algorithm. You really have to get granular, and you really have to crunch a lot of different numbers and a lot of different scenarios. But again, if you're looking to list your house in the South Carolina Lowcountry, whether it's Bluffton, Beaufort, Hilton Head Island, or Jasper County, or if you're a buyer moving in from New York, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, California, and you don't know this market, you know, give me a call, send me an email, shoot me a text, book a Zoom call. It's all in the description below. I'd love to help you, and I'd love to get to know you. And if you want to stay up to date with the latest and greatest happening here, be sure and like, subscribe, and tap that bell for notifications so you'll be the first to know every time I drop a new video. It's been an absolute pleasure spending time with you today, and I hope to meet you in person at some point, but if not, I will at least see you on the next video.